I'm going to take about 5-6 minutes, and I want to give a short commentary, what I'm calling or beginning to call a civics in brief. And this is coming from demand signal from you, the travelers, you, the readers, right? To get more to some of the foundational ideas and concepts that undergird for the United States our founding and framing principles, and more broadly, what defines in many ways the values and the norms that are common denominator across all members of the community of democracy, small d, right? I want to talk about in this civics brief the fundamentals of paradoxical power and the American experience, an American political development experience. So what are America's paradoxical powers? What is that? What's at the foundation of that paradoxical power? America's always been powerful, again, but it's never been simple. From the very beginning, the United States has lived inside multiple compound contradictions, one that never quite resolves, but keeps resurfacing in new forms. Now, let me take us back to our beginnings. In 1776, liberty was declared universal, right? But in practice, when we allow ourselves to listen to ourselves and our own history, we understand that in practice it wasn't. By 1787, the Constitution was written to restrain power and to create enough of it to survive. That tension between ideals and enforcement, between freedom and force, has never gone away. It's simply changed costumes. Now, a bit later in our American political development, but still in the early republic, America broke its own rules out of a necessity to survive. A couple of cases in point here. The Louisiana Purchase. It stretched constitutional limits to secure continental power. It did so deliberately. We did so deliberately. We the people, right? Through our duly elected representatives. The Monroe Doctrine. A lot of talk today about the Monroe Doctrine 2.0, right? The Monroe Doctrine, the original one, warned 1823, right? It warned Europe off imperial ambitions while quietly asserting our own, right? That's a paradox. Manifest Destiny promised democratic expansion, while at the same time it delivered displacement, coercion, and war. Power grew, but so did contradiction, right? Paradox. Then came the Civil War, the ultimate paradox. The Union was preserved through unprecedented federal force. Freedom was secured through violence. Reconstruction promised equality, but its enforcement abandoned. The lesson was clear even then. Declaring principles is easier than sustaining them. Paradox. Now, let's go forward in American political development. By the turn of the 20th century, America had stepped onto the global stage, right? The Spanish-American War was sold as anti-colonial, yet it produced an overseas empire, right? The open door policy towards China and the Far East championed free markets backed by coercive access, protectionism, right? We were learning how to lead beyond our borders without fully reconciling what leadership really meant and how consistent or not so much so it was with those founding and framing ideas, right? Let's visit the World Wars. The World Wars intensified all that contradiction. In World War I, we fought to make the world safe for democracy, then repeated and retreated from responsibility. In World War II, we defeated fascism by partnering with totalitarian regimes. And with the atomic bomb, we discovered a new paradox, a weapon that could end wars and make annihilation permanent. Power had become existential. These are all realities, folks, and we've got to learn to come into coincidence and an equipoise, a balance with that paradox. That's how we convert paradox to real small l, small d, liberal democratic power, right? That's the underlying storyline here I'm trying to walk us through in this Civics 101 in brief. Let's keep going. The Cold War institutionalized paradox's strategy. We defended freedom through proxy wars, right? We partnered with illiberal regimes in the name of stability. And at the same time, the Marshall Plan showed another path. We did both, paradoxically. What did that Marshall Plan show in terms of another path? Strategic generosity paired with discipline. Then Vietnam shattered that balance completely, right? Anti-communism eroded domestic legitimacy. Credibility abroad collapsed alongside trust at home. America learned, again, that force without consent corrodes leadership. It's just a question of how long those lessons learned continue to be remembered, right? Now, after the Cold War, we entered what many, including myself at the time, called a unipolar moment. The Gulf War was a military success in the annals of long history, right? An undeniable military success, but at the same time with no long-term political settlement. NATO expanded to secure peace and planted the seeds of future security dilemmas. Humanitarian interventions promised moral clarity, but delivered selectivity. Power was unmatched, but seeing clearly became all the more hard, so much harder. Then came 9/11. Liberty was defended through surveillance. Security expanded, executive power. The Iraq War comes. It promises democracy through regime change. Counterterrorism perfected precision, while at the same time eroding legal and moral clarity. We kept winning engagements. We struggled to secure outcomes that lasted and deserved to last. Which brings us to the now. Economic engagement with China accelerates rivalry instead of convergence. America first speaks the language of, in some respects, a retrenchment, while at the same time exercising coercive leverage globally. We defend Ukraine's sovereignty, the idea of it, but without direct intervention to assist. We rhetorically reject imperialism while reasserting spheres of influence within our own hemisphere, our expanding hemisphere. The pattern hasn't changed, fellow travelers, only the tempo. Now, here are the enduring paradoxes that define this particular moment. A republic built on ideals, but with imperial reach. Unmatched force paired with fragile legitimacy. A global leadership strained by domestic polarization. Freedom of action, but a freedom of action that is increasingly colliding with the rules-based order we actually helped build. These are not failures of character. They are structural tensions. The danger is not that they exist. The danger is pretending that they don't. Because when a nation refuses to name its paradoxes, it starts to act blindly. It sprints when endurance is required. It mistakes dominance for durability. It substitutes force for legitimacy and speed for strategy. America's power remains immense, but power by itself does not guarantee leadership, or more to the point, a leadership deserving followership. Leadership requires something harder: judgment under tension, restraint without retreat, and the humility to admit that the hardest work begins after the action. America's story has never been about purity. It has been about correction. The question before us is not whether we remain powerful. Of course we do. The question is whether we can learn once again, how to wield power without losing the republic that gives it meaning. That's the paradox we inherit, and how we manage it will define the next chapter. Thanks for listening. Thanks for joining me in The Wise Way. And until next time, cheers.